which, when Rowan's going over the rules, it's if you're late, you get left behind. If you complain about what my wife's cooking, you get left behind. He's like, if you mess with the girl, bad things happen. Hello and welcome everyone to the Spines and Spirits podcast. I'm your guide today. My name is Adam, and I'm going to stumble until I find the 7 words that make y'all love me.
And this is Gerald again with a J. Once again for the night. Even got my hair down. So, welcome.
And this is Christy, always with a K.
So you guys already know, Spines, that part of our name, we're in the KingKiller Chronicles. We're going over a real deep dive here into The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Gerald, what are the spirits?
It's a spirit that you like to take a nice long sip on after I make a lot of noise with it.
We're mixing it up today. We're on the 1792. Gerald, what's the proof on that?
Proof is a 94 proof on it. And this is the lovely bottle. That's 1792 small batch Kentucky bourbon. Straight.
So you guys know that when we left you off last week, we left you off on chapter 28. We're going to be moving into chapter 29, which is the doors of my mind. And in this chapter, kind of what I spoke about a little bit at the end of chapter 28 was I felt like Scarpy woke something up in Quothe's mind whenever he called out his true name. I feel like that was the potential crack. And you see that in this chapter because he actually says he uses one of Ben's tricks and it allows him to think more clearly. And now he's thinking, yeah, the Chandrian have enemies. The chapter itself is super short and it basically ends with him finally opening up and reading Rhetoric and Logic.
I read this book probably 11 times, like I said beforehand. Listened to it countless times.
18. You said that last episode.
Is it 18 times? I think it's 19 now. I think I'm on my 21 now. Reviewing this book. And I never put 2 to 2 together until Adam says, I think something that Scarpy said broke in Kvothe when he said his name. And like I said, you once read over, you twice read over. Even the third time, never caught that. And it was amazing when Adam said it, and I'm like, when I'm rereading it now, and I'm like, that's why he was crying. I thought it was something else for some odd reason. So that was kudos on Adam's part on that.
I think Christy said it best last week when she said, yeah, read it the first time, reread it the second time, and then after you read it the third time, it's time to start a podcast.
Yep. Yeah, and here we are.
I think it's really funny I said that because I don't remember. Maybe I should not drink so much during these podcasts.
It was the spirits in our name, y'all. That's all it was.
That was because it's the 1 week that I drank some of the spirits, and I usually don't. I think there's only a couple things I can really remember about this chapter, or that stood out to me about this chapter is that Kvothe talks about, he reiterates what we've already known is that the Chandrian are scared of at least 3 things that we know of. That is the Emir, the Singers, or the Sith. So either way, I think at one point it was brought up that it might be an interesting little tidbit that possibly, I think Adam, you said this, is that Kvothe might be one of the Singers, even though we're not entirely sure who those are or what they are at this point.
We know Telu's one.
Really? How?
Yeah, it talks about that in Scarpy's story that Telu was one of the Singers.
I would like to put in that it's also that Kvothe has now realized he's not living a fantasy story. He's living real life, and he knows for these last 3 years after his mind is re-broken that, yeah, I'm going to kill Lanray. Kill the undefeated Lanray.
No, he actually says he can't. You know, and he says that he's got to find help for these people who are hunting the Chandrian.
That's what I'm going with, yeah.
And, it kind of bleeds in a little bit because where I was talking about how his he's starting to break a little bit. I think it's kind of funny that chapter 30 is called the broken binding, because I think it's almost like irony that the binding he has is breaking at this point. You know, I don't think it's necessarily just what the shop that he's selling the book at is called. I think it's more than that. I think there's some kind of like, you know, irony, like I said, that the broken binding is named this chapter, while Kvothe is literally breaking the binding that's been over him the last 3 years.
But yeah, that's what I thought about it on this one. And then he also, like Adam said, he pulls out the book, Rhetoric and Logic. And I'm kind of against Adam on this one. I think Kvothe has opened this book just only on a few occasions because he doesn't want to get dirty. He feels like it's a holy relic to him because it's the last thing that he has that ties him to his past. And when he opens it, he sees it. He sees the description that Ben gave him, and that gives him like, okay, so if I can't do this by myself, I need to find people that actually can help me on my quest I got to do.
Yeah, and I didn't say he didn't open the book. I said he hasn't read the book cover to cover. I think he would read it every now and then just for, you know, strength. But I do fully believe this is the first time that he's read it, and as he reads Ben's inscription, you know, that's when he says, I've got to go to the university, I've got to go to the archives.
Yeah.
This is where I can find help.
It really is funny though, because it was like, it was the one book, like, I don't know if you remember, but it was the one book that he did not read cover to cover. He didn't want to read it. And I think Ben knew that, and that's why. I don't know if it was like maybe something like he needed to read, or if it was just Ben being a butthole to him, just to say like, this is the one book I know you don't like, so I'm gonna leave this to you with my inscription, and make you want to read it.
It's a discipline thing, right? I mean, he's saying if you want to grow, you're gonna have to read. You're gonna have to do things you don't want to do. This is one of them.
Yeah, this is the big thing. I think that was one, like, I love how we can disagree and agree at the same time, because, like you said, even if he did read this book in the 30 years when he was in Tarbean, he didn't understand it really. He was just like, I'm just, you know, I'm treating this like a relic of my past. Now his mind has been open and been cracked open, and now he's like, oh, okay, yes, chapter 2, this is what I'm supposed to do. Okay, yeah, I got it. Keep it in my mind. So... yeah, he's now the door of his mind. He's now passing. I would say he's Xing out of the door of forgetting. If you want to try to play on words on this one,
he might be starting, but he's not there yet.
No, he's not there yet. He's like, he's still got a hand on his door. He's like, but.
And that leads us to chapter 30, the broken binding, which, like I said, there's some irony there because it's what's happening to Kvothe right now. In this chapter, he goes to the broken binding and gets essentially a loan, a pawn of his book, with the promissory note that he can buy it back within 20 days. There's some haggling that goes on there. He ends up, you know, kind of saying like the guy's not that bad as he goes to rob him. But this chapter, again, just like chapter 29, is not huge. There's not much in it.
And Kvothe is telling the story the way it happened. It's more bringing us, the readers, back to saying, hey, he's getting back to where he was Kvothe at 12 years old. He was smart. He was quick, because he basically takes this bookkeeper pretty well, because he said like him, you know, for 2 several talents, I want to sell this book. And he looks at him. Kvothe is dirty. He's filthy. He's not so unclean. So the bookkeeper does, you know, he's a merchant. He's not coming back for the book. So yeah, I'll give it to him. Yeah, the book's worth more than that when I'm giving it to you. And Kvothe has secretly like, yeah, you think that, but for the 2 talents you paying, I'm gonna pay you in 2 pennies. So there you go.
So as much as I think that it's kind of messed up for Kvothe to do that at the end,
the guy tried to swindle him.
It is, yeah, he swindled him, but it was funny because it was like kind of it tied in with all the whole part of him saying that he was stretching his mind.
The bookkeeper actually tries to apologize, like Adam said earlier, to Kvothe for being hey, I thought you was just a dirty merchant child, coming in just to pawn off a book. Even though I don't do pawns. This ain't a pawn shop. And he shakes Kvothe's hands.
So that takes us into chapter 31, which is called The Nature of Nobility. And in this chapter, he finally talks about it's the best meal that he can remember he's had. He gets it at a waterside inn. He wants a bath. In order to do that bath, he has an option to pay for it, which he has the money for, or he can do essentially like chores and work it off. He agrees to do the chores because this is the most money he's had in a while and he doesn't want it to go to waste. He works, he scrubs the hearth, and then at this point, he realizes, like, I don't want to put on the same dirty burlap sack and canvas pants that I had before. So he goes to get some clothes. And when he does this, he settles back into that mindset of acting. And he becomes the person that he remembers he used to be in the troupe. Let me ask this, I guess, for the both of you. What was your favorite part of him acting out this piece? Like what was the one thing that you really liked about this?
Madison, hold your ears, girl.
Oh, I was gonna say Madison already knows well about. I was gonna say what I'm gonna tell you.
She's been listening to the book, so.
Well, a harlot stole his clothes. Is why he's running around the streets butt naked. But he ain't really butt naked because he's in a
towel.
A lovely towel. Yeah.
And he gets a robe whenever he goes to the to the tailor.
Yeah.
I just like how he uses the word wanton.
Yeah, wanton. Yeah, wanton.
Like, that was my favorite part. He's like, wanton. A gentleman's dignity is never far from his purse.
But I just thought it was so great how he literally, like, he reminds me of, what was it, the Game of Thrones, the face, what was it, the mask?
Faceless man?
Yeah, the faceless man. Who, like, he can literally put on a mask and be somebody else. Like, he was able to just completely, like, oh, I am this pretentious, pompous
bumhole.
And yeah, he did really great at it. I mean, it was funny. It was like it makes you wonder. I think it kind of goes back to something that Adam had said earlier, is about why he didn't use any of his talents at the time he was scraping on the streets of Tarbean. And it's like he just pulled this out of his pocket, this character, and literally just like ran with it and was able to get whatever he wanted with this pompous jerk.
He's just he's like button. I'll be needing some change.
Oh, yeah. And this is a powerful lesson I think Kvothe is trying to tell us, and for the reader, for the readers, that in the modern day, something has Kvothe's attention to change his name to Kvothe. You know what I mean? I'm going with where if he's telling this big story for 3 years, I was a different person. I wasn't Kvothe. I was just a lonely child at 12 years old, fending for myself. I didn't have no skills. And then we come to the end in the present day, we have Kvothe kind of doing the same thing. I thought it was kind of interesting. If you don't tie it in, I tied it in after countless readings of this, and this just shows how the mind works in this world to me.
I think it's kind of funny because you bring up Kvothe and the innkeeper.
Mm-hmm.
That at the end of this chapter, he's talking to this particular innkeeper, where he's like, I would count myself lucky if I have an inn like this someday. And it's complete foreshadowing of what's going on in the present day. Now he's got his own inn, and he is that barkeep.
I was hoping when y'all brought that up, because it said it was a grubby inn in Waterside, and Kvothe's Waystone Inn is clean, immaculate,
But that doesn't mean that it's not in a grubby town.
I'm just saying, he never said that it was like a grubby. He never really. I mean, maybe he said grubby, but I don't know. But he never said it was like
Even this slightly grubby
nasty.
in the water side.
He says, and you know,
Does
he
he?
also said,
Yep, looking at it.
but his own,
Jail, stop looking at the dang book.
his own inn is in a town so small that like nobody hardly shows up.
Because he's hiding. He knows what's going on. He actually doesn't want to die, even though he keeps saying.
So he's in a grubby inn that he's taking immaculate care of. That takes us to chapter 32, which is called Coppers, Cobblers, and Crowds. So at the start of the chapter, Kvothe is wandering around trying to go back towards Hillside, I believe. And there's a lot of people walking with him, but he feels like he's being watched. So he's ducking in and out, trying to hide. And he ends up ducking into a shop that is ran by my favorite person in the world. And the reason that I say that is because it's not Trappist. You'll understand why in a minute. But he's a cobbler. He makes shoes. And so whenever this old dude walks out and he sees Kvothe standing there, he's like, must need shoes.
It's because he made a dad joke.
Because he wanted to laugh at his own joke too. But he's my favorite guy just for that line. Like, if I ran a shoe store and people came in, I would say the same thing. I would just be like, you must need shoes.
I'm sorry if you came upon this podcast on Twitter or anywhere else where you're like, hey, I'm looking for a book podcast. And my husband's like, you must need us.
A book podcast.
A book on Find the Spirits.
And that's what my husband fantasizes over. He's like, I'm just wanting to feel that need.
And for everybody that does stumble upon our lovely podcast, Christy is not sorry. She's being funny at the moment. And I do not appreciate her.
I am just saying, if somebody's got a gaping hole, I'm ready to fill it.
All right, so that's too much. That's way too much.
Okay.
Gerald was being funny, and you just made it weird.
I want to say he says something like, some people need to air out their feet. Could be the same with secrets. I don't know. I just sell shoes.
Just sell shoes.
And I love that little line as well. But I guess before we get too far ahead, because this is a slightly longer chapter, was there anything else up to this point with the cobbler you guys wanted to comment on?
It is one, and it's one of my favorite sayings. Fear tends to come from ignorance. Once I knew what the problem is, it was just a problem, nothing to fear.
So that comes back to like an H.P. Lovecraft quote that I love, which is the greatest emotion that humankind has is fear, and the greatest fear is fear of the unknown.
No, I always love that quote too, Gerald. Yeah.
Well, no, we got things. I got one more thing on the cobbler.
Go ahead, because I'm done with the cobbler.
Are you done with it?
Yeah.
Can you done with it?
So the cobbler, the shoemaker that Kvothe stumbles into. I love how he puts him into 3 different shoes.
There you go with the threes.
The threes, yeah, baby.
Does he really? Is it really 3?
Yes. I think this is Kvothe also showing us as readers one of his flaws. He's an arrogant kid. Don't remember what Apathy told him. After he tried to call the name of the wind and messed himself up real bad. He's like, yeah, kid, you're gifted, you're good, but you are reckless as hell. You have to think. You don't think some of the times. And I think this is one of his moments. He's telling, if you actually look at it, because a couple more chapters you'll see Kvothe does brilliant things, but he does some stupid stuff.
Hey, remember the story about Lonray? But and he was saying because Lonray had literally tried to basically get more knowledge than he was ready to handle. He got more power than he was ready to handle so fast, and we all know what happened there. Well, I think we do.
Actually, I will say this part. If we're going to go on that point just a little bit, I don't think Kvothe actually knew the story of Lamray, because he says later on, I mean, not later on, previous chapters, my father never finished the song, so he never fully got it until Scarpy has told the story. And I'm thinking this is one of the part of his minds that he's like, oh, that was an interesting story, but I'm, still not the Kvothe that you're telling stories about yet.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
That's a good point, Gerald. Yeah, you're right, because he didn't know the actual story of Lamray, so I guess the warning from Ben or Abinthy or whatever would be moot, because he didn't really. I think it says so many times, be wary of folly, but like, how? I'm sorry, like, what kind of folly? Like, should I not go running naked through the streets kind of folly? Or should I not destroy 6 or 7 kingdoms kind of folly? Like, which...
Or should I be wary of the person that wields folly?
Yeah, are we talking folly the sword? The weird, like, jagged sword that we're going to hang up over my bar in 5 years?
That is a beautiful sword,
I
and it's
don't
a
know.
lady. It's a lady sword.
It's
Don't
a lady.
It's a lady. Don't be this bass. Okay, you're bass now. Don't be over here disrespecting folly. It's a lady you're holding in your hands.
So after he leaves the cobbler, he goes and he finds caravans that are going to be making trips to Imre. He wants to go to Imre because that's where the university's at.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up stumbling across Rowent and Rita, and Rowent is giving him this information saying that it'll be 4 days to get there, 6 days if raining, and he tells him what it'll cost, which, when Rowan's going over the rules, it's if you're late, you get left behind. If you complain about what my wife's cooking, you get left behind. He's like, if you mess with the girl, bad things happen.
Okay, so we got to talk about this girl first before all
so
that.
hang on,
You jumped the gun.
So when he talks about the girl, the reason is because Kvothe's looked over and he sees what's gonna be Denna.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I noticed in this chapter, at least in this beginning part, when he describes the girl that he sees, it is so basic, it is so simple, and it is nothing like the way that he has gone over important details in his story. Did you guys pick up on that?
Yes, I did, and I will tell you why.
Tell me why.
My turn. I'll tell you why, because this is Kvothe. Like I said, and I love how Adam plays his own, and like I said, Adam's points brings a lot of content to my mind to actually think on, and I'm thinking that Adam's right. I think Kvothe is a singer. We don't know what a singer is yet, but I'm pretty sure Kvothe is one of them. Don't be spoiling book 2, y'all. But yes, I think Kvothe is a singer.
Spoiler, there's nothing in book 2 that says that either, but it's a fair
Kind of.
Kind of, but
he
yeah.
sings.
But Kvothe is telling this story, and the way he's telling the story is like how he does his music. This story is his music instrument that he doesn't play as coat. This is Kvothe telling a story, and it is absorbing us in. So he's telling in the order it happened, according to him. So when he explains Denna, she's not that really that important. Oh, it's a girl. She's older than me. But she's not that old. Where
Not quite a lady.
Yeah, she's not quite a lady. She can get away but still wearing pants, but it's on that fine line,
that's
kind
cool.
of thing.
So the only thing left that I had for chapter 32 was that he does go back to the basement where he had Trappist, and he's a little bit upset at first because the kids don't recognize him. They try to steal from him. Trappist comes in. He's talking to the other kids, and Kvothe is getting a little bit upset with himself, and he's like, man, he's not going to recognize me. So Trappist is telling him that he's got to go buy some soap, and he's like, if you tell them it's from me, they'll take care of you. And Kvothe is elated at that point because he realizes that, like, Trappist sees him. Trappist knows it's him. Trappist doesn't see the clothes. He tells Trappist he's leaving, and Trappist is just so excited because he's like, I love it when one of you get out of here. And that's kind of where the chapter leaves itself, is him saying his goodbye to the basement, that to the guy who runs this basement that potentially saved his life. What did you guys think about that?
I will say that Trappist has shown something more to me after reading this, because Kvothe is now, he's telling the story. So Kvothe is like, oh, I'm clean, I have shoes on, I'm pretty much part of the crowd. So like Adam said, he's saying bye to Trappist, wanting to say bye to Trappist, and he's seeing some of the children making him an outcast because he's not one of them no more. So he fears that Trappist will see the same way. Trappist sees Kvothe as Kvothe, and who else saw Kvothe as Kvothe? It's my point on this one. It's a long theory on this one, y'all. Stay with me. Trappist might happen to be a namer.
I don't think so.
Without knowing it. That's what I'm saying. Without knowing.
Without knowing it, I still don't think so. I think he's just a Talon priest, or formerly Talon priest.
I don't think it is, because the
Slash
reason was
possibly pedophile. That's just
Christy, those are fighting
I'm a
words.
cynic.
It's fighting
words.
Like I
It's
said,
fighting
I'm a
words.
cynic.
Listen.
I'm just
Yeah.
gonna say this: he comes back to Trappist in book 2 to take care of him, and I think
Yes.
he would not do that.
I
If
Yes.
thought we
what
weren't
you're alluding to.
talking about book 2.
We're not, but I'm
And I hate to do
totally
that.
sick of you dogging my boy.
Yeah, you hit low blows. And Kvothe has literally told you already, if anyone laid a hand on Trappist, we will maul him and he will
Alright.
not get up.
So apparently that applies
Never.
to like podcasters, and I feel like apparently
Don't talk about
gonna-
boy Trappist.
So I'm gonna be jumped after this.
So that's going to take us to chapter 33, and I'm going to talk for just a minute on this one because this is a heavy chapter for me. It starts off where it talks about how much Kvothe really likes cloaks with a lot of pockets. It talks about Sealdish money and how it's good enough to spend anywhere. But more importantly than that, it gets to Denna, and it gets to the first conversation that Denna and Kvothe have. And number one, right off the bat, I'm sure both of you know this, Kvothe starts off with a 7-word sentence, which will be talked about a little bit later. Should we keep up with the amount of times in this podcast that 7-word sentences are used between these two? That's my first question. Yes or no? That's all I want to know.
I'm going to, so yes. I mean, but if
Hey,
y'all don't do it, I'm
a
gonna keep it.
data analyst. Yes.
So we're going to do
Yes.
that.
Yep.
I would
But-
love to.
But number 2, the other thing I had is
Pass
where...
this
I wanna
point,
make some
y'all.
charts.
Past
Past
this
this
point. I
point,
still
yeah.
think this is number 1. I still
Yeah.
think this is number 1. But... And I will explain why
Yeah.
if we get to less talents chapter. But once they are spending the day together, this is something else I wanted to bring up to you guys, and something that I didn't realize until more recently whenever I read through this book and kind of started paying attention to the little pieces we're dissecting. There's a part where they're looking at clouds, and Kvothe tells Denna that he's looking at the clouds, and he's telling her essentially what the clouds, we'll see because I'm not done, but he's telling her about what the clouds mean for the weather, and to me he's telling her the names, and what she's doing is she's coming back and she's telling them she's telling him the shapes of the clouds. She uses a rose, number 1, number 2 a harp, number 3 a waterfall. 2 questions here. Number one, is this the first
Don't
time
do
that
it.
we see is this the first time we see a namer and a shaper coming together? And
Yes.
number two, is this some serious foreshadowing where she's explaining the shapes of the clouds?
After a while, after you get through the first book and then you go in the second book, you see that Kvothe and Denna are the same coin but opposite sides.
The 3
Yeah.
shapes that Denna talks about, which is the
Rose.
rose, a harp, and a waterfall. Like the rose obviously comes back to what she tells Kvothe about, like, all you men have the same book and all of you give roses. The harp, she plays a lyre, right? That's what's going to come up later. Has the waterfall been mentioned? Because if not, I have an idea about in book 2. Whenever he calls,
In book 2.
is it? Do you think that's when he calls he uses sympathy to cause that wave to like knock her down whenever they're playing in the river?
Yes, that's what I'm going with. That is how the waterfall is in book 2.
Is that
one
because the
comes
water
into-
hits her and she falls?
No, I think
Oh, wow.
no.
All
I
right,
think
so-
Kvothe used a little sympathy to help him out because he was like, maybe Kvothe has been, Kvothe has been done wrong by the Chandring, and Dana has been wrong by the Amir.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yes.
That's
That's early.
picture
This
you're
is too
painting,
early of a
Bob
theory,
Ross,
but yeah, boom.
I feel like there might be a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah, because I think her patron's in a
Let's go
mirror.
with-
But anyway,
For the record, I think the waterfall is not come to pass yet.
So you think it's in
like,
Doors
the
of Stone?
rose and the what is it, the harp? Or the-
Mhm.
Yeah, those are obvious things, and
Could be.
But I feel like the waterfall maybe is just like the third thing that has not come to pass.
when will
It
we
could
see
be.
that?
When Doors of Stone comes out, we are going to enjoy the hell of it. You understand what I'm saying? With you and your
And it will
out.
fully be covered on this
I can't wait
podcast,
to-
Yes.
probably
So
chapter by
long.
chapter at this
By
point.
chapter by chapter, it's gonna be chapter. Listen, we're gonna read one chapter. And be like, yeah, we're on live. Go. What do you think?
I can't
Chapter 2.
imagine.
We'll be back.
Honestly, I only
Go.
just got introduced to these books like 7-8 years ago,
Yes.
or however. I don't know how long it was, but I can't imagine like Adam, the cloud. You read the clouds.
Yeah, you're talking about Zed, and that's in the
Zed.
Wizard's First Rule.
Yes.
So
That was the book that got us all together, y'all. Wizard First World, which will be on this podcast
I'm sure it will at some point. For sure.
sometime.
Did it get us all together? Gerald,
Yes.
you read that too?
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't know
Yeah.
Gerald read
And
that.
Adam was the one that brought me to.
Like every
one.
book, I bring
Yeah.
you guys.
That's why he's our guide, and we're just the lonely hosts, lonely
Really,
hosts.
we're just following in his wake.
There's a very interesting courtship going on, and I think it plays heavily into the lay of Sir Savian Trailyard, where once Kvothe talks about that song in depth, he talks about how there's this certain melody going on, and then there's like a counter harmony that doesn't quite match, but at the same time it kind of melds together. You see that between Denna and Kvothe.
Kvothe uses being empathy's description kind of in the wrong way sometimes. I think that he's like, oh, this would be folly if I unjuggle this point. You will see this later on in a few chapters of this book that you're like, okay, I love how Kvothe he's passionate, he's brass, he goes for it and all. But when he needs to go for it, it seems like he never really nails it. It's just an odd thing to me. And like I said, we have heard the ballad of what's the
We
ballad?
haven't
Yeah.
heard the Ballad of Sir Savian Trailyard. It's only been mentioned
have.
that
Once,
right, it's only
because
been
his
mentioned
father
once.
did it, and it was taxing him on his father.
right, and he said
Yes.
even he can barely do it justice.
I-
But we
I
don't know
told
that
Adam
much
this.
about it.
We don't
And
know. We
don't
don't
know
know
much
the
about it.
tale. We
And
don't
that's
know
what I
the
was
tale
saying
of
is
it.
like with their courtship here, where they're back and forth. It's almost like they're playing out that lay of Sir Savian where
and we don't
it's
know
a-
who
there's
is
a
the
counter
I always
harmony
kind of
that doesn't
assumed that
follow
was
it.
them. Like sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. I'm just saying. I don't think we actually know who is like.
Sir Savian Trailyard.
Sir Trailyard is. Pardon my French, y'all, but I don't think we do, and that we.
He's probably fictional. It's an Ilian song.
I don't think it's fictional. I think it's
He's
in
based on
himself.
something real life, but I think he's fictional.
I always assumed
Yes.
it was based on obviously Ilian and his what was her name, Lyra? That's
No, that was
You
Land
think
Rat.
Ilian was with Lyra?
No, not Ilian, sorry.
If you follow the story,
Talking about Land Ray.
Wow.
if you follow the kind of
You
story.
just pantsed me in a schoolyard is what you just did. That's what that was. That was pantsing me in a school.
In this chapter, Dana says 7 words to him. That's what I was going with. I'm sorry. I
She
looked at my notes.
does.
Yes.
What did she say?
And the 7 words are, that's as much as I guess too. And always when they do the 7 words play, especially in this chapter, there's always a pause. Like they are, the words they're saying captures them. I don't know if y'all caught that, but they always have like a little pause and like a circle that they like. It's kind of like a little dance they do amongst each other, and this is how it carries on through the book, y'all.
Gerald, it's really interesting because I don't know. I know I've picked up on Kvothe saying the 7 words to Dena, but I don't know if I've ever picked up on her saying them back.
I will also say that while they're doing this dance, neither one of them talk about their past, which I think I already talked about beforehand. It's just how we do our little chit chat to going in.
Neither one of them want to tell anybody about their past. I feel like this is like an obvious like unsaid thing that they don't want to talk about it, but it's not so obvious that they understand each other in that way, that they are wanting to like, they're just like, okay, I know you don't want to say anything about what happened to you or where you came from, so I'm not going to ask any questions. If you don't ask any questions, then that's our understanding.
So that takes us to chapter 34, which is called Yet to Learn. There is another character introduced, Jocelyn, and he joins the caravan and he's flirty with Dena and wants to make her another wife. That invokes quite a bit of jealousy within Kvothe. What makes it even worse with this particular character is whenever they set up camp for the night, he opens up a loot case, and it's a trooper's loot. When he takes out the trooper's loot, I thought it was kind of funny that at first Kvothe describes it as basically like a step above like firewood, but when he gets his hands on it, he says it's the most beautiful thing that he's ever seen. Even more beautiful than Dena. Almost. His binding, whether it was put on him by the Chandrian or whether he put it on himself, further cracks. He starts playing, he loses himself, he's playing, it shatters, he misses a note, and it makes him stop playing, and he realizes all these people are staring at him. What happens after that is what I thought was most interesting in this chapter, though. Kvothe, the innkeeper, who's telling the story, talks about Kvothe in the third person for the first time.
Now you see Dana laughing it up with him instead of Kvothe, and Kvothe is like, yeah, I don't really appreciate that, and I'm too prideful to actually try to join in with y'all, so I'm just going to stoop by myself, kind of thing. And then the nighttime comes out, and Jocelyn happens to have a loot, and Kvothe is like, yeah, so if I was maybe 2 days beforehand, I would definitely steal that from you, my boy. It's how he goes with it. He's like, yeah, I will totally take it, and I'll run off with it. I don't care, because I've been missing music. It's actually literally been 3 years since I played the lute.
I don't know if he would. Nah,
he did. Yeah, he said he was still. It's like if it was the option, he was like, yeah, I would totally steal this, and run off. But his common sense get to him. Was like, if I did steal it and run off, I mean, where am I gonna go? I already paid to go to university. It's kind of one of the moments where Kvothe is being logical with it. Jocelyn plays 3 songs, the number 3 again. After the third song, Rowan was like, okay, it's time for sleep. You sleep too late? And Derek says, yes, we know, we'd be left behind. I'm thinking Kvothe is playing not just songs that he knows. He's playing songs that he written himself when he was in the doors of forgetting. Because
I think
the reason
he's playing names.
Because the reason why I say this is because that's what I'm going with. It's the door for forgetting, but he doesn't know what he's playing. He just start playing the sound, how wind falls, or riding in the wagon of Ben with Ben. You know what I'm saying? He's playing songs like that because he says, I played for maybe 10 minutes to an hour. I don't really know. I just lost myself into the music. His most powerful intimate is his music to express himself. And when he's expressing himself, he might not know he's actually naming things. His mother was great when naming, but his father was a genius on the lute.
He said words. You didn't say names.
Words.
That's...
What words? I mean,
I will
come
say,
with me.
if you want to push it.
Now,
right.
I feel like a quote like hit the lute and I hit the wrong string and y'all for that perfect. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm like, oh, my cells are gone.
34, and where Coat is like playing his lute, and he's like, I don't know, he can't do anything but feel. For playing that lute is probably one of the things that really got me to stick with this series, because it's just so real. It's just so like in depth.
So that concludes tonight's episode. You can find the link to all of our socials down in the description. We appreciate you guys taking the time with us. I'm sorry if I've sounded awful tonight. I have been sick and under the weather.
I'm Gerald with a J tonight again, and we are sipping on the 1792.
We appreciate you guys tuning in. If anybody, it was Christy that got left behind tonight because she wasn't keeping up. Thank you guys for watching.